I knew something was off the second Dylan swaggered into my cubicle, like he'd just been knighted by Bezos himself. Fresh out of college with that smug, deodorant commercial grin, he plopped into the guest chair across from me and said, "So you're the one I'm shadowing, huh?" Shadowing. Right, more like circling, like a vulture with an onboarding badge. Greg had cornered me in the break room that morning, reeking of Axe body spray and ill intentions, grinning like he'd just discovered fire. "We just need a little redundancy, in case you ever take a vacation, Ava," he said, using the tone of a man who thinks saying redundancy doesn't make him sound like a firing squad in khakis. I hadn't taken a vacation in 4 years. Not even a sick day. Once worked through a double ear infection and a sprained wrist because payroll doesn't stop just because you fell down your porch stairs chasing a squirrel out of your tomato plants. So yeah, I knew the vacation line was BS. Dylan wasn't here to learn. He was here to replace. And to make things worse, the little twerp kept narrating everything I did like he was filming a YouTube tutorial. "Oh, macros. Sick. So you built this whole reconciliation process yourself." Just nodded. He didn't need to know that I'd spent months automating our archaic expense routing system, because Greg once blew a gasket over a $12 mileage reimbursement showing up late. Dylan typed like a caffeinated squirrel, trying to impress me with questions that sounded like they were written by ChatGPT after a couple beers. Meanwhile, Greg kept materializing behind us like a haunted Roomba. "Hey Ava, quick thing. What kind of access level are you giving Dylan for vendor management?" "Read only," I said, without looking up. He didn't like that. I could smell his disapproval before I saw it, like cheap cologne and career sabotage. Might as well just give him full. He's gonna need it eventually. I smiled and didn't move a damn finger. "And hey, since you're already here with me in this mess, maybe do me a small favor. Tap that subscribe button and help me hit my first 10,000 subscribers. It's free, unlike Greg's soul. Plus, it tells the algorithm you like stories where smug guys get exactly what's coming." Anyway, I kept playing my part, dutiful, helpful Ava, walking Dylan through the guts of the company's accounting skeleton like nothing was wrong. But I was watching. I noticed how Dylan knew where the vendor authorization templates were before I even showed him. I noticed how Greg kept checking the timestamps of our sessions on Slack. I noticed when Dylan asked me if we kept legacy backups of payroll from 2020 and winked like we shared an inside joke. We didn't, but I was about to make damn sure we would. At one point, Dylan tried to bond by calling Greg the goat. I nearly choked on my LaCroix. Greg once printed out a meme thinking it was a slide for his presentation. If Greg's the goat, my cat's a damn rocket scientist. But I smiled. I taught. I explained formulas and approval flows and all the places you don't touch unless you're ready to explain yourself to a dozen angry auditors. And all the while, I let Greg think he was 2 moves ahead. Thing is, I'd already flipped the board. The sushi joint Greg picked for the company lunch was one of those upscale places with minimalist decor and bonsai trees by the windows, just pretentious enough for him to pretend he had culture. He kept calling it authentic, like he hadn't just Googled Japanese restaurant impressive enough for CEO. I showed up early, because old habits die hard and I like to know the exits when I'm walking into a lion's den. The CEO, Mr. Takahashi, arrived 5 minutes after me, sharp suit, calm presence, and eyes like he'd already scanned every weakness in the room. Mayu, his longtime assistant and translator, was unfortunately delayed due to a flight hiccup. Greg, of course, saw it as an opportunity to flex. "Guess I'll have to put that Duolingo streak to work," he joked, nudging the CEO as he sat down, already sweating through his collar. We ordered. I stuck to tea and tempura because I was too focused to eat. Greg was already 2 sake bombs deep, chuckling at his own jokes and spitting out kindergarten-level Japanese with the confidence of a man who once dated a hostess in Shibuya and thinks that counts as immersion. It was somewhere between his 3rd mispronunciation of simple Japanese word and a half-brag about streamlining our legacy systems that he leaned in toward Mr. Takahashi and let it fly. "She's a bit old-fashioned. She'll be gone by next quarter." He chuckled and looked straight at me, eyes glazed with arrogance, thinking he just whispered something clever that floated right over my head like smoke. But I heard every syllable. What Greg didn't know, because he never asked, because people like him never do, is that I spent 5 years in Tokyo. Lived off vending machine onigiri and yen 280 ramen while finishing my MS in financial systems at Todai. I studied Japanese till my dreams came with subtitles, navigated pension filings, and digital payroll audits in kanji, so dense it would make most Americans cry into their QuickBooks. So when Greg called me old-fashioned, I smiled. And when he said I'd be gone next quarter, I reached for my tea with the calm of a woman preparing a funeral playlist. You see, something in me shifted right there, like a gear clicking into place. Not rage, not yet, just clarity. The kind that settles in your spine like cold steel. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to defend myself. I was going to end him, quietly, precisely, in a language he'd never understand. I tuned out the rest of lunch. Let Greg ramble about efficiency metrics and digital pivots like a man who just discovered buzzwords. I watched as he mansplained our own software to the CEO and handed over a printed handout with graphs I built, but his name at the top. I caught the side-eye Mr. Takahashi gave him, subtle but sharp. He wasn't impressed, just politely enduring. When lunch wrapped, Greg patted me on the back like he was blessing the help. "Great job not zoning out during the Japanese," he said, laughing. "Oh, I found it very educational," I replied, bowing slightly. He missed the edge in my voice. Most men like him do. And as I walked out into the drizzle, umbrella in hand, I whispered something just for me in Japanese, my turn. Because that was the moment I stopped being his employee and started becoming his reckoning. I spent that weekend with a bottle of Pinot and our internal payroll logs pulled up on my personal monitor, combing through metadata like a forensic accountant with a vendetta. I wasn't looking for closure. I was looking for leverage. The first thing I noticed, Greg had manually adjusted his year-end bonus 4 days after the window had closed. It was subtle, buried under the noise of Q4 cost center transitions. He'd used an override code we typically reserve for emergency corrections, think maternity leave adjustments or retro pay bumps. The kind of thing nobody questions if they trust the person holding the keys. Unfortunately for Greg, I am the person who built those keys. Over the next week, I bled red ink into a private spreadsheet I named Gregory's Greatest Hits. Vendor hash 8483, Benton Consulting $7,250 paid in Q3. No invoice, no point of contact, no contract in our files. Vendor hash 9211, Mosaic Advisory listed address is a WeWork that shut down in 2021. Project Zenith Sync, marked closed last year, suddenly had $18K in consulting fees backdated into February. Greg wasn't just skimming, he was siphoning, and doing it with the finesse of a man who thinks VPN stands for Very Private Network. But I didn't go nuclear, not yet. I kept training Dylan like nothing had changed, showed him the ropes, smiled through his questions. "Oh wow, Ava, you coded this reconciliation template?" He'd say. Hum, I'd hum. Sipping coffee, I'd started brewing with decaf just to stay calm. He once asked if we could simplify the controls around approvals. I blinked twice. "Sure," I said, already modifying his access so any changes he made would auto-forward to an admin inbox I controlled. Little by little, I gave him rope. Let him feel empowered. Gave him a taste of admin-level permissions, carefully sandboxed, monitored, timestamped. I wanted Greg to think Dylan was ready, that his little understudy was learning fast, that he'd soon be able to replace me. I even started misnaming columns in my walkthroughs, just to see who was listening. Dylan wasn't, but Greg, he took notes, literally. I caught him skimming my Slack messages after hours once, too stupid to realize our internal system flags when someone reads a message not addressed to them. I screenshotted that too, and the whole time I moved like fog. Quiet. Slow. Left no ripples. Every receipt, every bonus bump, every falsified timestamp, I logged it, translated it, labeled it with context. Greg's salary hikes. Dylan's unusually fast approval tiering. Notes on emails I knew Greg had blind copied to Tokyo claiming credit for process improvements I had spent 3 fiscal quarters optimizing. See, there's a special kind of clarity that hits when you realize your job isn't worth saving, but your pride is. Pride, when weaponized properly, becomes the most elegant form of vengeance. Greg once joked that the thing he liked about me was that I didn't make waves. He was right, because I was the tide, and he never saw it rising. It hit me mid-scroll, somewhere between a forged vendor contract and a bonus request stamped urgent in Comic Sans, like some kind of war crime against professionalism, Mayu Tanaka. The CEO's longtime assistant. Back when Mr. Takahashi had first taken over, She used to handle his stateside affairs like a diplomat with a burner phone. She translated board meetings in real time, caught typos in financial reports before the ink dried, and could shut down an entire room of execs with a single raised eyebrow. A legend in heels. She'd left the public-facing side of the company when Takahashi scaled back travel during COVID. Rumor had it she was still deeply embedded in the Tokyo office, quiet, surgical, and fiercely loyal to the boss, which made her the exact kind of person I needed. I dug through an old Outlook archive until I found her last known address. Sent a ping. Simple, harmless in Japanese. It's been a while. This is Ava. I have something I'd like to ask you briefly. She replied 3 hours later. Same crisp politeness I remembered. No emojis. No sent from my iPhone nonsense. Just a short line, of course. I'm listening. We met over encrypted video 2 nights later. I sat in my apartment wearing a hoodie and slippers. She sat in what looked like a glass conference room in Tokyo with the skyline bleeding neon behind her. I didn't dump everything. Not at first. That's not how you speak to someone like Mayu. You let the facts breathe. I've noticed a pattern in vendor expenses, I said. They don't align with project timelines. And someone's adjusting bonuses outside compliance windows. She didn't blink, just nodded once. Are these adjustments recurring? Yes, and the person responsible, Gregory R., VP of Ops. Mayu exhaled softly. Not shocked, not yet moved, but listening. I shared a single document, just one. A redacted vendor payout spreadsheet with dates, amounts, and metadata. No accusations, just breadcrumbs. She tilted her head slightly. Do you have more? I do. And from that moment on, I had a tether. Over the next 10 days, I fed her data like clockwork, edited spreadsheets, comparison logs, a zip folder of overwritten timestamps Greg thought he deleted. Spoiler. He didn't. I translated every file header into proper Japanese. I included footnotes for corporate context, cross-referencing our internal approval codes with their Tokyo equivalents. Didn't editorialize, I didn't beg. I simply presented truth like a scalpel. Cold, sharp, irrefutable. Mayu never praised me, never slipped into camaraderie, but I could see it, little signs. The way her responses got shorter, more precise. The way she asked for raw copies or original metadata exports. That's how you know someone's building a case. When they start asking for source code, not just summaries. Outside of those messages, nothing changed on the surface. Greg still walked around like he was hosting a TED talk no one asked for. Dylan kept eating yogurt aggressively next to me while pretending to understand pivot tables. The office buzzed along like any other underpaid Tuesday, but I wasn't drowning anymore. For the first time in weeks, I felt my spine straighten, my breath deepen. I had a line to Tokyo now, a real one, not through Slack, not through Greg, through Mayu. That meant every keystroke I logged had weight. I wasn't clawing for survival anymore. I was planting seeds in concrete, quietly, deliberately. Greg thought I was alone, that no one would ever listen. But someone was, and she was fluent in silence just like me. It happened on a Tuesday like all corporate betrayals do. That morning, I got a calendar invite I hadn't requested. Kickoff, Zenith Sync Transition Owner, Dylan K. I stared at the screen for long. Why hit second? Zenith Sync was my project. The one I built from the ground up during lockdown, working 18-hour days in yoga pants and unbrushed hair, while Greg pinged me at midnight with quick questions. I had cleaned up 3 years' worth of bloated code, integrated it into payroll, and rebuilt our reconciliation pipeline to survive a nuclear audit. It was my Sistine Chapel in Excel. And now Dylan, who still couldn't explain the difference between gross and net, was listed as its new owner. No warning, no handoff, just a digital eviction notice. Greg didn't even have the balls to tell me directly. Instead, he ambled past my desk, coffee in hand, wearing that smug, two-sip grin that made me want to throw a stapler at the wall. Hey Ava, he said. Hope you don't mind, I figured you could use some bandwidth relief. Dylan's been asking for more responsibility. I smiled like my molars weren't about to crack. Of course, I said, happy to support from the sidelines. He nodded like I'd just handed over my legacy, instead of cataloging his obituary. 2 hours later, the real masterpiece landed in my inbox, an oops email, CC'd to the Tokyo board. Subject line, payroll optimization, initiative initial successes. Inside, 3 paragraphs of Greg congratulating himself on modernizing outdated processes, plus a bullet point that read, Zenith Sync transition already complete under my guidance. Early signs show significant efficiency gains. He called it his guidance. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I downloaded the PDF version from my archive, renamed it Delusional Idiot V3 Final, and kept moving. Then I saw it, the attachment at the bottom, a compliance document supposedly confirming the new process met both US and Japan side standards. Looked official. Language was tight, dates aligned, but something twitched in my gut, like when a magician says, pick a card and you realize the whole deck is rigged. I checked the metadata. The signature block for the compliance officer, copied from an older form I filed 6 months ago. The approval code, reused. The timestamp, backdated using a patch script I personally buried in the sandbox for version testing. Greg didn't forge a form. He forged mine. Thought I wouldn't notice, wouldn't care. That I'd already rolled over like a good little legacy hire and started knitting throw pillows for my exit interview. I messaged Mayu, please review the attached document. The format appears correct, but the contents and signature have been altered. No reply for an hour. Then just one word, confirmed. She didn't ask follow-ups, didn't hedge. She forwarded it straight to legal. I wasn't copied, of course, but I knew the signs. Delay, the silence. That's how the machine moves when it's shifting its weight towards someone's throat. Greg strutted around the office that day like he'd just discovered fire. Dylan walked past my desk, awkwardly gloating. Hey Ava, if you have any Zenith files, I could really use them. You know, for continuity. Sure, I said, sweet as poison. Let me find the sanitized versions. I opened a new folder on my desktop, named it Scorched Earth, began organizing every file, screenshot, and audit log into a final, polished package. Greg had made his last mistake, and I was no longer collecting evidence. I was preparing the execution. The invite hit inboxes late Friday afternoon, right when people are mentally peeling themselves out of office chairs and dreaming about tequila. Subject line, Q4 Efficiency Strategy Attendance Mandatory. Inside, vague language, cost optimization, organizational alignment, Greg's greatest hits. And right there, 3 names quietly listed under transition consideration candidates, mine dead last, like he was trying to cushion the blow with alphabetical insult. I didn't react. I didn't forward it to anyone. I just screenshotted it, saved it to my in case I'm gaslit folder, and closed my laptop with the calm of someone who already knew the last act had been choreographed. Because that morning, 4:42 a.m., Seattle time, just after Tokyo's lunch rush, an email was sent from a confidential Tokyo address to every board member on file. No subject line, just attachments. The first, a spreadsheet titled Unauthorized Adjustments 2022-2023. The second, a PDF labeled Compliance Fabrication Gregory R. The third, a ZIP folder named Full Audit Trail Internal Use Only. Each file meticulously translated. Headers color-coded. Timelines mapped. Approval metadata untouched. Nothing flashy, just unrelenting accuracy. The kind of evidence that doesn't yell, it whispers, look closer. By the time I walked into the efficiency meeting Monday morning, the boardroom was packed, uncharacteristically quiet. Greg stood near the head of the table, flipping through his presentation remote like he was auditioning to be the next Tony Robbins. His tie was crooked. Smile looked just a little too practiced. I chose the front row, sat dead center, crossed my legs and folded my hands over a notebook I didn't intend to open. I wanted him to see me when the floor gave out. Greg clicked through the first slide, cost containment goals. Then the second, operational realignment. On slide 3, his voice cracked slightly. And finally, key restructuring areas to streamline redundancies and promote fresh innovation. He paused. Before we dive in, I want to, address something that came to our attention this morning. Oh, there it is. He tried to play it off like some harmless administrative hiccup. We received an email that includes some internal documentation that appears to have been manipulated. We're working with legal to, the CEO, silent until now, raised a hand. No, we're not working with legal, he said quietly. They're working with us. A single line, like a scalpel to Greg's jugular. Greg blinked. I'm not sure what you mean by. Another board member slid a printed copy of the audit trail across the table. Did you authorize these payments? Greg reached for it with the hesitancy of a man trying not to leave fingerprints. Across from him, I watched the room freeze frame around his unraveling. Every breath, every eye shift. It was all there in high-definition corporate silence, kind of silence that only happens when the predator realizes he's prey. My tea thermos clicked softly as I took a slow sip. Mint chamomile. Greg's favorite. He used to brag it helped with performance anxiety. Guess it stopped working. I didn't need to speak. I just sat there, smiling, not smug, not loud, just ready. Let the walls close in. Let the email do the talking, because the only thing louder than justice is a trap sprung in absolute quiet. I kept stalling like a man caught with a bloody glove and no script. His voice got higher with each excuse, trying to pivot the conversation to broader organizational shifts and future-facing leadership strategies, like jargon could cancel out arithmetic. But the CEO wasn't moving. He just stared, motionless, at a single line in the document. One line, one transfer, one name. "Mr. R," he said, voice low and clipped, "can you explain this transaction?" Greg's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That payment was part of an end-of-quarter adjustment tied to vendor onboarding. The reconciliation team approved it. I have the memo somewhere. His hands fumbled through a folder like a magician looking for a rabbit that never existed. I believe Ava might have signed off. I didn't even blink. And right then, like fate had cued the entrance, she walked in. Mayu, 5'0" of silent command, dressed in a navy blazer and calm fury. She didn't nod, didn't smile. Just walked past the stunned execs, straight to the head of the table, and handed the CEO a navy folder stamped with the Tokyo office seal. No one moved. Even Greg sat frozen, one hand still in his manila folder, like maybe if he just stayed still enough, she'd vanish. The CEO opened the folder. Read silently. His eyes didn't change. But he passed the contents to his left. The ripple began, each board member reading, glancing at Greg, then passing it on. Mayu stepped forward, calm, composed. She opened her mouth and delivered the line that would end careers. "This manager, Greg R., has defrauded this company and insulted your judgment. See attached documentation." She didn't raise her voice, didn't flinch. Just read it like she was announcing the weather. Greg looked like someone had unplugged his spinal cord. His mouth fell open. Nothing came out. His eyes darted left, right, looking for a lifeline, a rebuttal, even a misplaced sympathy nod. None came. Someone coughed. Papers rustled. A chair creaked, and me? I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I just shifted slightly in my seat, adjusted the sleeve of my blazer, and looked him dead in the eye. He knew. Mayu set the folder down with surgical precision, turned toward the door, and as she walked past me, our eyes met. No wink, smirk, just a subtle nod. The kind of nod shared between two women fluent in strategy, silence, and survival. Greg tried one last Hail Mary. This is clearly some kind of vendetta. She's been undermining me for weeks. And the CEO raised a hand again. No more. Greg sat back, quiet, breathing like a man who just realized the oxygen in the room belonged to someone else. And the room held still, because everyone knew the decision had already been made. Greg must have known it was over, but men like him don't go quietly. They thrash, they flail, they grab at whatever scraps of power they think still exist. He leaned forward like he had a trump card up his sleeve. "With all due respect," he began, always the battle cry of a man about to disrespect everyone, "I believe Ava has been actively working against my leadership for months. She's been slow-rolling handoffs, withholding access. Now she's gone behind our backs to sabotage my relationship with Tokyo." He said relationship like he was in some kind of long-distance situationship with the board. The room didn't react. No gasps, no shifting chairs, just the thick, still air of people watching a dying battery try to spark. I stood, no rush, no theatrics, just enough time for every head in the room to turn toward me. Then I bowed just slightly, formally, properly, and in Japanese. "Clear and crisp," I said. "When you joked about firing me, you forgot something. I know your language better than you know your job." The silence hit like a thunderclap. One of the younger board members sucked in a breath. Someone near the back actually murmured, "Damn." Greg just froze, blinking like maybe if he stared hard enough he could rewind time. The CEO didn't look at Greg. He looked at me and nodded once. Security didn't drag Greg out. Would have made it too easy for him to spin as victimhood. No, it was worse. Two internal operations guys quietly stepped forward, motioned toward the door. Greg's mouth opened again, but no words came. He picked up his laptop like a child forced to leave the sandbox, shuffled toward the exit like he was still waiting for someone, anyone, to stop this. No one did. Once the door clicked shut, the CEO turned to the board. "Let's move forward," he said simply. Mayu handed out a brief memo detailing internal realignments. At the bottom of page 1, under Revised Reporting Structures, my name was listed. Title: Director of Financial Systems reporting to Tokyo HQ. I had signed the contract 2 weeks ago. I gathered my folder, took one last look around the room, at the executives still trying to process what just happened, at the empty chair Greg had left behind, at the folder Mayu had placed like a tombstone. Then I walked out. No strut, no grin, just calm, fluent silence. Somewhere behind me, the sound of a chair squeaked back into place. The meeting continued, but I was no longer in it. I was beyond it. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.